Now let's go back in time with Dr. Maya Angelou.
Thank you, Gina. When God put Noah in the grand old ark, he put a rainbow in the cloud. When the thunder rolled and the skies grew dark, God put a rainbow in the cloud. God put a rainbow in the cloud. God put a rainbow in the cloud. When it looked like the sun wouldn't shine anymore, God put a rainbow in the cloud. Now I am here tonight to talk about the power of words. And who among us would doubt that words have power? I, for one, was most impressed when I read in the Bible that God spoke his creation into existence. Now that's power. You and I don't have that kind of power in our words, but we do have the power to create, to build up, to tear down, to shape and share our feelings, our emotions, hopes, dreams. I have worked my entire life as a poet in an effort to use words and craft them into story. And it is work. Some of my critics have said that I am a natural writer. That comes right after a natural heart surgeon. You see, Nathaniel West said, "Easy reading is damn hard writing." And he is so right. Nothing so frightens me as writing, and so satisfies me. When I write, I go to work. I am up in the morning at 5:30, and at 6:30 I am at work in a hotel room that I have rented for months. And I have had them strip it bare. Nothing on the walls, no pictures, no clocks, no televisions, no radios, just the bed, the desk, chair, and lighting. And I go into that room with a stack of yellow legal pads and a fistful of ballpoint pens, because I write everything in longhand. I also take in with me a Bible, a dictionary, a thesaurus, a bottle of sherry, and a deck of cards. And I used to take in a carton of cigarettes and an ashtray, but no more. The cards are for solitaire. You see, I find that if my small mind and hands are busy looking for the patterns of red and black, that my big mind is free to work. So you see, the solitaire is part of the writing process. I work like that until about 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I go out into the world, the real world, and I shop, or I go to the grocery store and get the ingredients for a good meal, and sometimes I entertain folks, and sometimes I cook for just myself. I am a good cook. And then at about 8 o'clock, I look at the work I'd done that morning and start marking it up, cutting, making suggestions in the margin, and then I go to bed. And at 6:30 the next morning, I'm back at work. Now, I am a poet, and I've always considered myself a poet first. And I fell in love with poetry during those 5 years as a child when I did not speak. I was in Stamps, Arkansas, and certainly the Black community there was encouraging me to speak, but Mrs. Flowers held the secret. Mrs. Flowers was the aristocrat in Stamps, Arkansas, you know, always the perfect hat and purse and white gloves and accessories. She would invite me to her house for tea, and I would sit and drink tea as she read to me. She started with A Tale of Two Cities by Dickens, but moved on to poetry and pretty much stayed there. There must have been something about my face that told her I loved poetry. But it was Mrs. Flowers who said to me, "Marguerite, you love poetry, but until you feel it roll over the back of your tongue, through your teeth, and out over your lips, you will never truly love it." And so, after hearing her read, I tried the music of the language myself by taking the books I'd been reading under our house in Stamps, Arkansas, where I thought no one would hear me. And I started to read the poetry of the greats aloud. Now, you may wonder why I decided not to speak for 5 years. But I did speak to my brother Bailey, who is my only sibling and only 1 year older than I. You see, when I was 7 years old, I was raped. Now, the rape of anyone is brutal, but the rape of a child, is a matter of the needle giving because the camel can't. It's a matter of the child's body giving because it can, and the mind of the violator cannot. I thought that I had died. And my family thought that I had the measles. I was confined to my bed, and my brother Bailey would come in and take care of me. He would keep my company, read to me, bring me food, and change my bed. And that's when he found my soiled panties that I'd hidden underneath the mattress. He pulled them out. "Who did this to you, Mai?" I didn't want to tell him. He kept pressuring me, and I had to say that the man who did this said he would kill me and kill my brother Bailey. Well, it didn't matter so much about me because I thought I was already dying. But I couldn't let him kill Bailey. Bailey was the love of my life. He was my closest friend, my protector. And when I told Bailey this, he just laughed. And he said, "Oh, nobody's going to kill me. Who did this?" And I took my 8-year-old brother's word as gospel and told him. He told our mother. The man was someone familiar to our family. He was my mother's boyfriend. And when I got out of the hospital, I testified at his trial. He was found guilty. but it might have been that night or the next night, but I overheard the policeman who came to our door tell my grandmother that they had found the body of Mr. Friedman in an alley, beaten and kicked to death. And in my 7.5-year-old logic, I thought that my words had killed him. And I swore then that I would not speak ever again, except to my brother Bailey, who had already proved that nothing could harm him. And so I did not speak for 5 years. Now let me tell you who I was in Stamps, Arkansas. I was Marguerite Annie Johnson. You see, our parents married in St. Louis, Missouri, and then they moved to California. And I was 3 and Bailey was 4 when they divorced. And they didn't want us. So they put tags on us, saying, "Deliver them to Mrs. Annie Henderson." That was my father's mother in Stamps, Arkansas. And they put us on a train in San Diego, and we made it to Stamps, Arkansas. And there we lived with Mrs. Annie Henderson, the woman we called Mama, because she raised us up. She was a big woman with large hands and a soft voice. And everyone in the black community and quite a few in the white community knew her because she owned and operated the only store in the black part of Stamps. And it was a business that she had built from the ground up. Everyone knew Miss Henderson, Sister Henderson. And when they would see her, they'd say, "Oh, sister, we see you got your shadow with you today." That was me. Everyone knew us because everyone knew her and loved her. I felt safe there and loved. But it was not that way on the other side of the tracks in white Stamps. You were carefully taught before you ventured over there, even with an adult with you, what you could do and not do, what you could say and not say. I couldn't even look up and smile at someone. It didn't matter what their age or their gender or who they were in the community. They looked at me with such loathing. I never and still don't understand it. Now, when we were 7, Bailey 8, our father came to, we thought, take us to live with him. And we were very excited, but we didn't get to California. He stopped in St. Louis, Missouri, and gave us to our mother. And there I was raped. And afterwards, not speaking, to them I was a sullen, morose child, and they had no use for me, so they sent both of us back to Stamps. But there, they accepted me for who I was, what I had experienced, and what I had chosen to do. At school, they understood that I was not speaking to anyone. I would always write whatever I needed to do or say. You know how in those little southern black schools, the teachers always would have more than just one grade in a class. And I was so excited the year that I was finally in class with Bailey. And not only that, we were going to have the new teacher. And so on that first day, she had every student stand and say their name and their previous year's grade. And when it came to my turn, I got up and walked towards the board, and she said, "Where do you think you're going?" And all the children answered, "Oh, she don't talk, Miss Williams. She writes. She's going to write her answer." "Oh," said Miss Williams, "I've heard about you. It's not going to happen in my class. Speak." And Bailey popped up. "She's just going to write her answer on the board. She doesn't talk, Miss Williams." But Miss Williams was getting more and more angry, and I was confused. I knew that I dare not speak, but I also knew that I was supposed to obey the teacher. And I just stood there paralyzed, and she was getting more and more angry and coming closer and closer to me until she finally slapped me across the face. And I, crying, ran out of the school building and ran home. And there at the store, Mama said, "Sister, what are you doing here in the middle of the day?" Well, Bailey had followed me, and he explained what happened. And then Mama said, "Junior, you go back to school and get your lessons. Marguerite, you go out to the pump and wash off your face and cool off." She took off her apron and told Uncle Willie she was leaving the store in his hands, and took me on back to school, and we walked straight into Miss Williams' classroom. And Mama said, "Miss Williams, do you have a grandmother?" And Miss Williams had to admit she did have a grandmother. And then Mama said, "Well, this here is my grandbaby." And she slapped Miss Williams right across her face. And then she turned to me and said, "Marguerite, what I just did was wrong, but I was trying to teach a lesson. Now you go back to your seat and get your lessons." Well, no one spoke about that incident the rest of the day. And when I got home, Uncle Willie said, "Marguerite, go into the kitchen. There's something special waiting for you." And there in the middle of the kitchen table was Mama's caramel cake, the one that she was famous for throughout the community. Nobody could match it, and it was there for me. So I took it out on the porch and to cut it and share it with everyone. And Uncle Willie said, "Now, Marguerite, I don't want you to think that's for anything that you've done. It's just to show you that we love you." I was loved. At the age of 14, Bailey saw something that no one should see. He was on the white side of the tracks when some white men, too, were pulling the body of a black man out of the river. It was swollen and stinky and mutilated. And they turned and grabbed the first black men that they saw, 2 other men and my brother Bailey. And they said, "Carry this back to the jail." So they got up and carried it back to the jail and put it in a cell. And as they turned around, those white men shut the cell door and locked it and started to walk away. And my brother Bailey was panicked. But those 2 older men, they called out, "Hey, boss, come back here and let us out of here. Well, we didn't have nothing to do with this happening. We was just brought him here doing what you asked us to do." And eventually, those 2 men turned around laughing and saying, "That was just a joke." And they unlocked it and let them go home. Some joke. When Bailey shared that story, he asked, "Why? Why do they hate us so?" And Uncle Willie said, it isn't hate exactly. They're scared, that's all. It's fear that makes them act so mean. Well, right then, Mama knew that Stamps was not going to be a safe place for Bailey to grow into his manhood. And so she took us really, took me first and then Bailey, to California to be with our mother, a woman I did not know and did not love. Bailey came on, and then after a few days, Mama went back to Stamps. And at a certain point, my mother had a sit-down talk-to, as she used to call it. She came into my room and said, Maya, by then my brother's nickname for me had become my family nickname. Maya, you've been here almost 2 months and you haven't called me anything. Now, I understand you might not want to call me mommy or mother or mama, but you need to call me something. What do you want to call me? And I looked up at her and I said, Lady. Lady? Why would you want to call me lady? And I said, because you're too pretty to be a mother. And she laughed and said, Lady, all right. And she was everything that I wasn't. She was beautiful. She was small and petite and confident and determined and full of energy. And when she walked into a room, everyone's attention was drawn to her. And she loved it. Lady. Yes. Everyone can call me Lady from now on. But then she took my face in her hands. She said, I haven't seen you smile since you've been here. Will you smile for me, Maya? I didn't want to smile for her. But she kept saying funny little things and making little faces so that much against my will. I smiled. And she smiled and laughed with tears streaming down her face. I knew it. You have a beautiful smile. I knew you would have a beautiful smile. You are beautiful. And she kissed me. And as sure as I am, and as I was at that moment, that my family in Stamps loved me, they had never told me that I was beautiful, and they had never kissed me. And from that moment on, I was hers. It took some time, but I grew to trust her because she trusted me and gave me confidence and was confident that I would be a great woman and that I could determine some things for myself. It was unconditional love, to the point that when I was about to finish high school and had to tell her that I was pregnant, she asked, well, does he love you? I said, no. Well, do you love him? No. Well then, she said, we're not going to make 3 lives miserable. You're going to have this baby, and he's going to be our baby. And so, 3 weeks after graduating from high school, I gave birth to my only child, Guy Johnson. And that's where my first autobiography ends. Finishing high school, my newborn child, and striking out into the world, a young 17-year-old mother, to make a life for myself. The book is called I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, my first, and really, it was a book that I did not think that I would write. I started writing it in 1968. I was in a depression. You see, I was about to celebrate my 40th birthday when a friend called and said, Maya, I don't think you want to have the party today. Martin Luther King Jr. has just been assassinated. I spiraled down into a deep depression. And you know how those are. I could barely move. I couldn't eat or sleep or keep myself clean or neat. And I was in bad shape. But my good friend Jimmy Baldwin came over and said, Maya, get cleaned up and we're going out. You can't stay like this. Let's go to Jules and Judy Pfeiffer's house. And so Jimmy took me there. And if you think I'm dropping names, well, I am. And we drank and shared stories of our childhood. And the next day, Judy Pfeiffer called Bob Loomis, an editor she knew at Random House, and said, Bob, I think I just met someone who has a book in her. And you can ask Bob how often he's heard that line. But it's a testament to his relationship with Judy. He trusted her and started asking me if I wanted to write my autobiography for him. And I said, no, I'm a poet, not an autobiographer. And he said, oh, but please. And he pestered me again. No, I said, I'm too young. Come back in 20 years and maybe I'll have something to write. But he continued, no, I do not want to do this. I'm about to go to California and write a 10-part series on Black American culture for a public television station. I don't have time to sit and write an autobiography. And then Jimmy intervened. And he told Bob, if you want Maya to do something, you have to tell her that she can't. And so the next call was, oh, I understand why you might not want to write an autobiography, because it's virtually impossible to write autobiography as good literature. It's nearly impossible. Well, I didn't need to think. I told him, I'll try. And so there I was in California, sitting down at my mother's kitchen table, starting to write my first autobiography. And I knew that I needed to be honest in that autobiography because of who my mother and my grandmother made me to be. And so I made myself vulnerable. I said all the good things that I could think of, but all the painful things as well. And when it was published, I was terrified. Not only was I afraid that they would not like it, I was afraid people would not like or respect me because of what I shared of myself in that book. And it turned out to be just the opposite. People loved the book. And I can only think that it's because I made myself so vulnerable, because I explored all of myself and was able to forgive myself. And that empowered my readers to forgive themselves. And that takes courage. It takes courage to forgive, to be honest, to love. And it's a kind of courage, not only big issues like that, but the courage we have every day when we get up and go to work, or or push ourselves to go do something we really don't want to do, and we show patience with our children, or when our children show patience with us. We all have courage, and we need to encourage each other in that. So I'd like to close with what I'm hoping are words of encouragement to you. You can write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You can trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like stars with the certainty of tides. Just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my haughtiness offend you? Oh, don't take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words. You can cut me with your eyes. You can kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear. I rise into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise. I rise. I rise. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I thank you all. Thank you.